Hey Michigan fans, Keith here from Lewis Jewelers, and we are super excited to be able to cheer on all the student athletes that will be on the field and the courts this season. But just like Michigan sports, special moments have not been canceled. Come into Lewis Jewelers or visit lewisjewelers.com so our team can help you celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or your just because moments. Go Blue!
Lewis Jewelers, celebrate the moments.
Welcome back to another edition of the Wolverine.com podcast. I'm Chris Balas. With me, Doug Skene, Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman, making the rounds on the radio circuit, man. You're all over the place. Have they called you from the West Coast yet or anything?
No. Thank goodness ESPN hasn't called me or anybody else because I think between these podcasts with you and going on the huge show, that's probably enough, Balas. I don't know how we can break down this Michigan football stuff this time of year any more than I already do.
Yeah, are you going to negotiate for more money here from us?
Well, what I thought I would do is take the contract that you've offered, and I got apparently before Christmas, and just sit on it a while and not sign it. I know my contract is good through next year, but I thought I'd just sit on this a while and just irritate the hell out of everybody by not signing it and keeping everybody in the dark and see how that goes.
There you go. You're not money for your wife. Is that what it is? And,
well, I can't tell you that, and I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm just going to not sign it for a while and see how irritated everybody gets.
Yeah, the kid needs a new PS5 or whatever.
Is my frustration coming through?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's enough. When's enough, you know? And I can't even imagine being in Ward Manuel's shoes right now. And obviously, we're talking about Jim Harbaugh and his contract situation. And you keep hearing, okay, well, you know, we're going to sign it. And, you know, the thing is that he got a contract offer. I think they pretty much had a deal in place last March, right before COVID hit. And Jim Harbaugh's thinking, okay, you know, it works for me, an extension. Then a couple of things happen. COVID hits, number one. Number two, you have a crappy season. Number three, the athletic department is facing what, an $80 million deficit now because of COVID. So they're going to have to be some concessions made. And it doesn't sound like Jim Harbaugh is really willing to make as many as people thought. You know, that's not about the money with him. I got to tell you, Skene, when is it not about the money with a lot of these guys? These guys have big egos, and that's not a slap at Jim Harbaugh. It's really an observation about the coaching profession that you got to have a hell of an ego to be in this profession anyway. So you got to wonder, right?
Yeah, it always makes you wonder, and when coaches do that. But for us and our coach in our program, when you hear a coach say, "I love Michigan, I want to be at Michigan," the way you can show that is by signing the contract that you were offered and jumping out there and declaring to the world that I am the Michigan coach and I'm here and I'm happy to be here and I can't wait to get to work. Now, he's said everything and done all those things except sign the contract. And so, you know, this was Mr. Meritocracy guy just a few years ago where everything is earned. And so here we are, you know, nearing the end of his contract, and the meritocracy equation equals, you know, average performance. And so I guess average performance, if I'm Ward Manuel, equals the contract offer he got, which allegedly was for less base money with more incentives, which should equal a good score on the meritocracy formula. But maybe he don't like that. So maybe the meritocracy thing is out the window now. I don't know, Balas, but it doesn't add up to me. If you love Michigan, you want to be here, sign the contract, prove to us how great you are, and prove to the team and the program that you're willing to get this thing back on track and get it to the winning ways that we all expect. And then everybody's happy.
Yeah. If you were Ward Manuel, what do you do? I'll put you on.
Yeah, if I'm Ward Manuel, I can tell you, I'm not Ward Manuel, but if I were, and every day that goes by that this coach doesn't sign this offer, I'm getting more irritated. And I'm getting more bothered, and I'm getting more emotional. And you got to fight those things when you're trying to do business and keep it to the facts and keep the judgment high, the emotion low. But boy, it'd be hard to do. And because there's emotion involved, and Ward played here, Jim played here, those guys were on the same team together. They won championships together. But right now, because of the things you listed, there's other things in play. Ward's got $100 million problem. And we have a football program that's not meeting expectations. we haven't even gotten to the point, Ballas, where imagine that the COVID thing is solved in some way, shape, or form, and fans are allowed in the stadium again. Do you think the stadium's full? And do you think it's full of people that are willing to sit there and cheer on a team that's average at best? I don't think so. I think there's going to be a lot of people ready to go in there and boo their heads off at what we've seen so far in the last year anyway, in the performance. And so there's a lot of emotion, I think, that builds every day that goes by. And if I'm Ward Manuel, I'm measuring that. And at some point, again, since you asked me, I've got a red button on my desk, and it's got a big word that's written on it, and it ain't easy. It's eject. And I pull the ripcord, and I decide to go in a different direction. And if I have to make some maneuvers financially and authority-wise on campus to make it happen, I'm doing what's best for Michigan football, and I'm going to get a coach who 100% wants to be in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and I'm not sure who that guy would be, but there are several out there, and it's clear, man. Everybody's talking about, okay, I think Jim Harbaugh can find his fastball again, and a lot of people have said that. I'm not sure that's clear, Skene, and I'm looking at, basically the last several years. You look at the recruiting, number one. You look at the talent level. I'm not seeing a ton, none on the top three All Big Ten teams, not a single player. And I'm sure some of that has to do with, they didn't play as many games. But if you told me, for example, if I asked you who's the MVP of this year's Michigan team, who would you say?
Oh, I would have guessed Hutchinson or Quiddy. I would have guessed either one of those guys.
Yeah, but I'm saying at the end of the year now, we've seen the body of work. Who do you?
Yeah, at the end of the year, I got to go back to my favorite player on the team, Ronnie Bell. That's my favorite guy.
Yeah, and that's a guy that wasn't among the leading receivers in the Big Ten. Maybe Hassan Haskins, and who was the guy that got one carry against one of those teams. I got to tell you, I don't remember much about the season. I've kind of blacked it out, and it's kind of like the Rich Rod years, where hey, do you remember that game? No, I don't. I've chosen not to, I guess, or myself.
Well, it's funny you say that. I was hearkening back to the Rich Rod years, and that 3-9 season. I remember standing in Michigan Stadium watching Michigan play Northwestern on a cold, dreary day where I swear there was not more than 70,000 people in that stadium. The team was terrible. The season was a tank, and it was a miserable experience. And I related to this year's Wisconsin game. It was a chilly night. It wasn't raining. I think it was raining that night a little bit, but just a terrible season. The team had no juice. There was no excitement, and we're getting our asses kicked up and down the field, and it's a rock bottom feeling. But just when you think things can't get worse, they can. There's nothing stopping it from getting worse, but somebody, dang, it's got to step up and make it better, and it has to start at the top.
Yeah, it really does. And by the top, you got to change the culture, number one. But number two, I feel bad for these assistant coaches. 5 of them, their contracts are up on Monday, Skene. And what do you think? What do you do? Because here you are, and you've thought, okay, we're going to be fine, and we've got this extension maybe last spring, and now, who knows what's going to happen? There are going to be a few of them that aren't back anyway, but it's not fair to these guys either. No matter what Jim Harbaugh says to them, until the deal is signed, it's not done. These guys aren't going to have an opportunity to look for other jobs if Jim Harbaugh doesn't sign soon. And if he leaves, they're kind of out in the cold. And you said it many times. It reminds you of Mark Staten at Michigan State with Mark D'Antonio, And what did he end up doing?
Well, Mark ended up he's landed a job. He's at the University of Toledo coaching staff, but he was hung out in the wind by Mark D'Antonio as all those other coaches were, except for a couple that got retained on the new staff. So if you're an assistant coach in Michigan right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty, you have to make a decision. Are you putting your cards and your chips with Jim Harbaugh, or do you have to take care of yourself and go find yourself another job and go somewhere else? It's a totally personal decision. You have to weigh the factors, take the information you have, and make the best possible decision. I wouldn't be surprised at all if a couple of these guys found their way to other staffs just to be safe and get themselves into a secure situation on a staff that is stable. Right now, it appears that things are unstable until Jim Harbaugh signs that contract. And I'm an assistant coach. There are no certainties what the future is for me and my family.
What's the future of this program going forward, man, in terms of what you've seen with the talent? Is there enough talent here to get back to they're not going to be at Ohio State's level anytime soon, and I think a lot of people have accepted that. I hate to say that. It's the acceptance mode, right? The 5 stages of grief or whatever, but I look at it, and you look at a football factory like that. I wrote a column on that recently that, hey, the top 3, 4 programs, whatever it is in every year, are always going to be a step ahead until the NCAA intervenes or until some other measures are put in place. Maybe name, image, and likeness will help level the playing field, but can they be up there in that second, third position, man? I'm not seeing a lot of hope for this program here in the near future.
Yeah, listen, there's talent in that building. We just haven't found a way. Jim Harbaugh and his staff hasn't found a way to get collectively all of it reaching its potential. So the question is, what does it look like with Jim Harbaugh as the coach for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever? Well, let's just look back at the previous 3 or 4 or 5 years. You're going to be second or third in the Big Ten East. That's it. I mean, Balas, I try to be as pragmatic as possible. I want the absolute best. I want championships for these young men and these coaches that work their tails off. But I just don't see it. I mean, there's just not enough of development, and there hasn't been enough of production in the biggest of games, and then those one-off games where we lay an egg, at last year at Wisconsin, this year at Wisconsin at home. It seems like every year. It's no longer a coincidence, Balas. This is a full-blown pattern. These expectations have been built. And until a coach, his assistants, and a group of players decide wholeheartedly, we're going to do whatever the hell it takes to fix this and find a way to win for the team, I don't think much changes. I think in the future, we look forward to a Jim Harbaugh-led program. You're probably looking at a 9-3, 10-2, 8-4 at best, as long as he's head coach, because that's what we've seen so far. 6 years, that's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, he's been closer, and but you know what? The farther we get away from 2015, 2016, the worse it seems to get. And
that's a long way in the rearview mirror at this point, is it not?
Yeah, but let's go back to 2018 when they had an opportunity there. Going into Columbus as a favorite, so it's not like we're
and then we were nowhere close in that game. Got blown off the field.
Right, and there could be many reasons for that, but I can't look at that and say, okay, well, that's indicative of, okay, there's always going to be a 30-point gap, no matter what in your best year. They were out-coached. It certainly looked to me like Ohio State had more talent, but more than anything, it looked to me like they got out-coached, and which is one of the
listen, I agree with you. You and I have talked about that many times. And listen, let's be fair. Ohio State does have more and wider and deeper talent on their roster than we do. But is it 30 points better than ours? No. The answer is no. It's absolutely not. And we can go back against those games against that team, and we ask the same questions. How is it that Michigan's best players are having their worst games against Ohio State?
I don't know. I really don't. And it's been that way forever, and they haven't made the big plays. You can go back to Josh Metellus' drop pass a few years back when Michigan's up 14-0 down there at the goal line. You got to make plays in games like these, Skene, and they haven't been.
Yeah. Khalid Hudson with the offsides on I think it was a punt.
Yep.
And Wilton Spate turning the ball over, going into the end zone on the north end at Ohio Stadium. We fumble a snap. Hey, man, you want to beat the best, and Ohio State is clearly the best in our league. You cannot perform that way. And you go back before then. Go back to all the years where Michigan beat more talented Ohio State teams. We didn't make those mistakes, so they were better prepared to play. They were better coached up, and they went out and performed and had great victories that we all sit and talk about in the long history that goes way back when. But we haven't seen it under this head coach. We come close, but I'm not a hand grenades guy. It's horseshoes. You just haven't produced it. You haven't won these big games, and in the last couple seasons, it's not even close. You've been blown off the field, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's talk about, say Jim Harbaugh isn't here next year, and I'd say, we've said the longer it goes, the more likely it is that he won't be. We're at what? January 6th. So, this has been going on for a month now. So, who do you like? I'll be honest. I'm starting to look at other guys, and I'm thinking if I'm Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh wants to continue to negotiate, I'm starting to look at other candidates here. And who do you?
Listen, having watched the bowl season, Ballas,
Yeah.
there's one guy that stands out to me. There's two. One I think is a realistic shot at getting in a fantasy land that we're talking about here. But Matt Campbell at Iowa State, he's a Mount Union guy from Ohio, came up through the Midwest, did a good job at Toledo. And if you watch Iowa State play, that's the kind of football program you'd love to have in Ann Arbor, and it mimics a lot of what we've seen in the history of their program in Ann Arbor. The way he recruits, the character of young men he's got on his team, they play their tails off, and there's a lot of understanding of the Midwest culture in that staff. I would take him as my first choice. Second choice, Luke Fickell. And yes, there's an Ohio State tie there. The greatest of Michigan coaches came directly through the Ohio State program. Would I think that Luke Fickell would ever do it? No. I think Doug Karsh made a great point last week, and I was listening to him. If you're an Ohio State guy and you cross the line to come support Michigan in any way, shape, or form, you're basically ostracized and excommunicated from the entire state of Ohio, and that's a tough thing for him and his family, an Ohio State guy, to do. Would he do it? I doubt it. Would it be a great opportunity for him? Absolutely, because I think he could do it. He's obviously winning at Cincinnati and producing talent there and winning big games and competing. I know they didn't beat Georgia, but they look good. So those are my two top choices. Matt Campbell, number one, though.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I think it's time to start seriously looking. And if he hasn't yet, and say, okay, enough's enough, and tell your big time boosters, hey, we're going to be paying a $6 million buyout. I'm sure that's not going to go over well with the regents, with the president of the university. It's not like you have money to burn right now. It's not like Michigan is Texas or Auburn or any one of these southern schools, and I don't expect that they should be, man. Flushing money down the toilet. That's what people don't understand, is that the culture here is a little bit different than saying, hey, Tom Herman, you haven't done a good enough job here at Texas. We're going to let you go. Here's multi-millions of dollars to get the hell out of here. That's not how Michigan really operates.
Yeah, and listen, I don't think Ward has the unilateral power to make these kind of decisions, but it doesn't help that it appears as though we have a university president who I'm not sure even knows where Schembechler Hall is. And I'm saying that with sincerity, Ballas, and I don't get the impression that President Schlissel knows where the football program is or cares where the football program is. So when you have that kind of thing going on up on the Hill, that doesn't bode well for the desire and effort to have a winning football team, which we can go into the details of what that does for a university. That's been well documented around the country over the last 10, 15 years as salaries have skyrocketed. And you see schools like Texas make the decisions that they do. There's a beneficial factor to universities when you have a winning football team, but this president at Michigan right now doesn't seem to be on board with that kind of mentality.
No, they don't. And there are other, as Jim Harbaugh would say, there are bigger fish to fry, when it comes to COVID and everything else. And who knows if students will be back on campus and everything else. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. Skene, let's talk a little bit about some of the players. If you're building your team next year and you're looking at spring ball, where do you start at quarterback? Is it McNamara? Do you plan on?
You start, I'm sorry, Ballas, but there's no doubt. I cut you off there because there's no doubt that's who he ended the season with the hot hand. The offense was clearly more productive when he was running the show back there. But that doesn't mean anything that you eliminate others. But I think when you start your depth chart, McNamara's in the number one slot. Milton's in number two. You got to keep working on him because he's got so much raw talent. You can't give up on a kid like that. And you move forward. And if Joe Milton is willing to work hard and compete and refine his skills and get better at delivering an ability to run this offense, then you start there and you just continue to build the depth. But, I think Ballas, the other thing that has to change is when guys aren't performing, the leash that appears that Jim Harbaugh and his staff has had, where these guys get to continue to go out and perform in 2 or 3 or 4 games at a low level before they get yanked and pulled, that leash has got to get shorter, man. And I don't understand it. I don't get it. We've talked about it the last few years. Guys go out and they don't perform well, and yet they're still in there. Why does that happen? And you want to get the attention of the locker room, you make a couple changes and you get somebody out of the starting lineup and put somebody else in there. And if they want to run to the transfer portal and huff and puff and act like a 5-year-old, let them. You got to build a culture of winning, and we're here to perform. And if you don't, step out of the way because we'll get somebody that will.
Yeah, and I think the same thing goes with the coaching staff. If you don't want to hold people accountable, maybe we get somebody here who does, And that's what I love about Matt Campbell the most is the culture that he's built there. His players love him. They understand that they're going to be treated tough but fairly, kind of like Bo Schembechler, right? A guy that you played for. And I'm not comparing Matt Campbell to Bo Schembechler. I'm saying that culture is important.
Yeah,
And
you don't need everything doesn't have to go through the Schembechler lens. It has to
no,
go through the accountability lens and developing young people, whether it's in football or anything else. There has to be a demanding, challenging atmosphere and then a supportive behind that, right? So, yeah, you're going to demand excellence out of people. And when they fall short, which they will, you find a way to support them. And when you do that time and time again, you build trust. The players on your team know that you care and they're willing to fight hard because there's a reward in the end.
yeah, and it's not like, when we talk about Bo Schembechler, everybody's like, oh, you can't look at the past and your dinosaurs and so on and so forth. It's not about that. It's about what he stood for and the culture that he built there. And that's something that doesn't change, man, over the years. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. These are keys to winning football teams and winning football games is having a guy that understands that and builds that kind of a culture. I think Matt Campbell's a pretty good example of that. Sorry. It wouldn't hurt me at all to see Ward Manuel pull the plug on Jim Harbaugh. I hate to say it, but man, enough is enough.
Well, I'm with you on that, Balas. I've said so, for the last month, based on what we've seen through 6 seasons. And I know this one was weird, but everybody had to deal with it. I'm ready for the change. It appears that would be a healthy decision for Ward to make. And let's move on and hit the reset button and start something new. Wish him the best. And maybe he can go find a situation and back to the NFL or coaching, because I know the guy loves coaching, and obviously that's a football family, and I'm sure that he would do well wherever he ended up and find satisfaction for himself. But it just doesn't seem to be working here in Ann Arbor with him running the show. Now, you said earlier, can he go back and find his fastball again? It's certainly possible. Is it likely? Probably not. It's just so hard to go back and say, well, we want the Jim Harbaugh from 10 years ago. Well, Jim Harbaugh's not the same guy from 10 years ago. Neither are you, neither am I. And so you're just going to hit some magic reset button and just time warp backwards. I think that's an awfully tough situation to expect to happen, and I doubt that it would.
I can't speak for you, but I'm better than I was 10 years ago, pal.
Well, I hope so. You're better at golf than you were 10 years ago.
Well, that's not saying a whole hell of a lot. And it really depends. Let's be honest. So, all right, good stuff, Skene. I appreciate it, man. We will talk to you next week, and we'll see where we are. And if any major developments come up before then, we'll probably get on the horn with you then, and we'll talk about those as well. He's Doug Skene, Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman. Skene, Happy New Year. Appreciate it, man, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, go Blue.